This is Sports Overdrive with Taylor Jones.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Sports Overdrive. This is May the 16th, 2014, and my name is Taylor Jones. And it seems that every week the show goes on, we bring on bigger and bigger guests. Last week we discussed South Carolina Gamecock baseball with Neil White of GoGamecocks.com. We also talked Auburn Tiger baseball with Jason Caldwell of Inside the Auburn Tigers. Auburn in a little bit of a hole right now. They have to pull for two other SEC teams to knock off a couple of teams. They also have to dig themselves out of a hole. They're in a bit of a pickle right now. But our next guest joining us, you can catch her on the sidelines of every Georgia Public Broadcasting sports production, including High School Football Fridays, football, basketball, and cheerleading state championships, just to name a few. Very talented, very honored to have her on the show today. It's Grace Olson, social media correspondent and sideline reporter for Georgia Public Broadcasting Sports. Sat down with her this morning earlier in an interview, and we discussed a lot of things surrounding her career, also Georgia football, and a lot of other things. So without any further ado, here is Grace Olson from Georgia Public Broadcasting on Sports Overdrive. Joining us now on the program, she is phoning in from Atlanta, Georgia. You can catch her on GPB Friday night high school football, as well as all high school sports coverage on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Grace Olson. And Grace, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing wonderfully, thank you. We just talked about the cold outside. I'm liking it to maybe be a little bit warmer, but besides that, doing great. Ready for some football. Let's get started.
Oh, yeah, I am as well. You're young, but your gig in the media is not anything new. You have a ton of experience through various companies in your career. So what was it exactly about the media profession that caught your attention and said, hey, I really want to do this with my life?
I love being surrounded by people. I love being in the thick of things. I love being where kind of all the action is happening. So I remember when I was actually in middle school, we were forced to watch this channel called Channel 1. All my friends hated it, but I actually was kind of the nerd that loved it. And since then, I knew I wanted to be a host of a television show and media, journalism somehow. And then in high school, I was really an active part of our school in general, and especially on the athletic side. I swam, I played basketball, and then eventually cheered for football and basketball. And we went from winning state in basketball to reaching third round of playoffs in football, and that spirit, the cohesiveness, and all of that surrounding athletics, I just absolutely fell in love with, and I knew that was the direction that I wanted to take my media communications journalism career, if you will. So I ended up going to the University of Georgia, and they have one of the best broadcast programs in the country, and obviously part of SEC Sports. I grew up in Atlanta, so I'm a Georgia fan through and through, and so it was great to kind of have that combination of a great journalism program and also big sports to be covering all year long while I was there.
Just overlooking some of your accomplishments, you've covered SEC championships, Final Fours, just to name a few, and as well with all of your work that you've done with Georgia Public Broadcasting. So personally, what are some of your favorite moments or some of your favorite games that you've experienced in your career?
Well, I began working in the field actually with ESPN. I started as production assistant, and my senior year of high school, my economics teacher knew a girl that worked for ESPN. So she came down to my high school and said, hey, this is kind of how the industry is. This is how you can get in if you want to work in it. So my sophomore year at Georgia, I thought, this is a competitive industry. Everybody wants to work in sports. I got to start working this thing if I want to, be involved in it and be competitive in the field. So I worked a Georgia-Arkansas football game with ESPN towards the beginning of the 2010 football season. And it was just absolutely a blast. I was, again, kind of that nerd that was there, just soaking everything up, just wide-eyed and so interested in everything that was going on. I worked with the camera guy, going around shooting stand-ups with the reporters, and from there I just continued working sporting events with the networks. Some of the bigger events were a couple of national championships, one in New Orleans and Miami, Arizona. I've worked the Final Fours with CBS and tons of SEC football with CBS. So Tracy Wolfson, they picked up on the fact that I wanted to be a reporter, be a broadcaster myself. And since they liked the job I was doing for them, they allowed me to, they fulfilled my side of the deal, I guess you could say, and allowed me to work with the announcers, with Vernon Gary, and work with Tracy alongside her on the sidelines, the Final Fours, and those were amazing experiences and such large-scale events. And I really was fortunate to be able to, at that age, at a young age, all throughout college, work events like that, especially, actually being on the court. And my first Final Four, I was in Houston, and all of a sudden, the first game of the semifinals started, and I get like 40 texts at one time, like, are you at Final Four? Because everyone had seen me, on TV next to Tracy. So that's really where I got to soak up a lot of, how you go about being a reporter and being a broadcaster. And a crew that I really love is TNT's NBA crew. I work with Turner Studios in Atlanta, and Charles Barkley and Kenny and all those guys are some of the most genuine, especially when it comes to on-air personalities, some of the most genuine people I've worked with, and absolutely a blast. And when those guys are on the road, at the Final Fours, they are just cracking up all the time. I mean, the way you see them on television is exactly the way they are when they're hanging out with us. Nothing changes. So those are some of my favorite events and favorite times while working.
And the one form of media that's really grown in most recent years is social media, with Twitter being probably the main component of all social media. Part of your job with GPB Sports is to be the social media correspondent. So what's your take on the social media world, and where do you see it heading in the next few years?
That's right. We talked about some of my favorite events. I'd also have to add in the state championships. I mean, at these events, you're seeing these top prospects that are probably going to become, some of them top level athletes when they get to the college level. I mean, we have, Mike Bobo was there from Georgia. We have Mark Rick. We have the Auburn coaches. They're all coming to watch these prospects play in the state championships in high school. So it's very cool to be there for that part of the process for these kids. And social media is all a huge part of that. I mean, that's a large part of my job at GPB Sports, because it started as its own separate thing, social media. Like, everyone's trying to figure out how to do it, the most effective ways to do it. And it's become, I think, where it's more intertangled into the whole mix of how things happen. So a lot of the people that are watching, say, our state championship games, especially, when we hit the playoffs for high school football, they're really interested in seeing guys like Lorenzo Carter and, Malcolm Parrish and these players that are going to move on and play at the next level. And so on social media is a kind of a way for the communication between those athletes and the fans to happen. On our show, it's a way for our fans and our viewers to communicate with us about what they want to see, what's exciting them, just kind of giving us their thoughts on the games. And so GPB has tried to kind of, make that push early on, which is about 3 years ago, and really using social media and intertangling it into our broadcasts and letting viewers know, we're excited about how this is evolving and what we can do with it. And the biggest part is involving the fans and involving the viewers. I know with social media and athletes, at the highest levels in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, one thing that fans love is the loss of separation between them and the athletes, because now with social media, they can communicate with them really on a one-on-one basis. If the person they're tweeting or whatever you may have actually chooses to respond, that's part of it. But the fact that it's an option now is really a large part of, what's drawing even more fans to sports these days.
And I've asked a few media members about this subject too, and I'll ask your opinion about this as well. Back in as early as the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s, when it came to college football and college sports recruiting, there were the big three: Florida, Texas, and California. If any school picked up an athlete from either one of those states, they had found a gem. But now it seems like the past couple of years, Georgia has slid into the mix. They've produced a ton of talent, whether it be from Buster Posey and Jason Hayward in baseball to Dwight Howard in basketball. And, of course, you can't turn on a college or NFL football game without hearing a kid from Georgia making a big play. So with the growth of outlets such as Max Preps, Rivals, 24/7, and even with you guys at Georgia Public Broadcasting, do you feel that kids from Georgia are getting more attention in the recruiting spotlight?
Well, you know what? I think with the emergence of the internet and the spread of information, it's allowed non-traditional powers in any field really to stand out and to make their presence known and to be learned about, I guess, those traditional powers you're talking about. A lot of times people kind of, you could say scouts and recruiters and everything, they fall back on those regions and, knowing that, these certain states produce stud athletes in this specific sport. But sites like 247 Sports and Rivals and all that I really believe, I agree with you, that it has allowed Georgia to really kind of move to the forefront in a way, because you see Georgia athletes just really getting their name out there. People are more aware of the athletes coming out of Georgia, and I think people have really started to understand really the hotbed of talent that's available, very much so in football, and then also in other sports with athletes like Buster Posey, like you mentioned, Jason Hayward. So I think what those sites and what that coverage has done has allowed more Georgia to emerge and maybe stake a spot up next to those traditional powers and those traditional hotbeds. And everyone really benefits, because the fans and the viewers and everyone that wants, the readers that want to follow those athletes and follow the information, they have it right at their fingertips. Now, the athletes are probably the ones that benefit the most, and the teams as well, because they get their name out there and their talent is really recognized and utilized. And I, just following sports over the years, I completely agree with the point you made, and I think it's actually a very interesting one. But yes, I would definitely say that Georgia has really kind of pushed its way up to the top in terms of talent bed.
Georgia football, they've hired Jeremy Lord of the Rings Pruitt, as I like to call him, to replace Todd Grantham as the defensive coordinator. And they've also brought in Tracy Rocker from the Tennessee Titans to coach the defensive line. Both have national championship backgrounds, and they seem to be a great addition to a growing team. So what are your thoughts on the hires?
I think the hires I think they're wonderful. I mean, I have to say, when I first heard that Jeremy came over from FSU, I was a bit surprised. Obviously, we aren't there in the behind-the-scenes process. There are only a few people that are, Greg McGarry and Coach Richt and everybody. But, just having come off a national title was really cool, and really says a lot about Georgia, that Jeremy Pruitt wanted to come over. Tracy Rocker was obviously a great addition as well. And this is, I don't know if many people know this, but this is the first time in 50 years that Georgia, it was before Vince Dooley even, that Georgia has completely shifted the entire defensive staff at one time. So, I think Georgia didn't know that Todd Grantham necessarily was going to be heading out. And then once that decision was made and once it was confirmed and official, I think they, it was kind of just a whole, with Jeremy Pruitt coming in, it was a whole change in philosophy kind of. I think spoken a lot to Christian Robinson, who I'm pretty good friends with. He was a former linebacker at Georgia and now working with the safeties as a assistant coach and grad assistant actually. And he says that, these Tracy Rocker and Jeremy Pruitt, their experience with high school athletes really helps in their efforts to work, especially with the newer players, because I think he says it really instills that ability to teach. There's a difference between knowing football and being able to teach football. And when you're at the college level, you're in between high school and the NFL, so you're getting kids that are really still kids, they're, 18, 19, 20, and they're fresh out of high school. They're, learn the ways in high school that their coaches are teaching and coaching and everything. And they really need that force to, and the person to understand where they're coming from and how to really utilize where their brain is at that point, and the skills that they have. And that's one thing Christian Robinson has said has been really beneficial, is their understanding of the players and their willingness to work with them. Also, something with Todd Grantham, people kind of started to think, hey, maybe he is going a little overboard in terms of the complexity of the schemes and everything that he's trying to teach the defense. And it got to a point where you could tell, even in games, that the guys just didn't, they were lost at some points. They didn't quite know where exactly they were supposed to be in certain plays. They weren't quite sure what was going on at times. And Jeremy Pruitt has really kind of shifted that. And he's not, the scheme isn't changing. Nothing play-wise is being overhauled in terms of Georgia's defense. But Jeremy Pruitt is working with them to, maybe explain things in simpler ways. And create plays and schemes that are just as effective, but explain them easier and coach in a way that's more understandable.
Georgia had an amazing signing class earlier this year, and for you got to watch a few of these players in the state championship, including, as we mentioned earlier, Lorenzo Carter from Norcross, as well as Dominic Sanders from Tucker, just to name a few. What's your overall take on the 2014 signing class for the University of Georgia, as well as the players you have personally witnessed with your time at GPB?
I'm really happy with their recruiting class. You're always going to miss out on a couple players. You're going to have a couple that everyone's sure are going to Georgia, even the coaching staff is sure. And then all of a sudden they change their mind. And we have to keep in mind, these are still kids. They're making the decisions with their parents. They're not professionals yet. And I think people maybe hate on them, I guess, if you want to say, through social media a little bit too much when it comes to making the decision, because it's their decision. It's their next 4 years that they're selecting. So, but anyways, you're always going to have a couple misses. But I think Georgia overall, the class turned out very well this year. And I was there, like you said, to see a lot of these players play. We covered Norcross. The past 2 years we've covered a number of Norcross games, and so Lorenzo Carter, we've had the opportunity and the fortune, I guess you can say, to see him play throughout that time, and he's definitely a force to be reckoned with. He has a lot of skill, and he has a lot of even upside too. And I think he's definitely going to make a large impact at Georgia, and he has a really strong understanding of the game. And I think that's really going to help, coming into this new defensive coaching staff at Georgia, and that's really going to help improve Georgia's defense moving forward. And, we're moving forward with, we're not losing a lot of defensive players this year. We haven't lost a lot, but he will definitely be a great addition. And like you said, we've got Dominique Sanders from Tucker and Dietrich Dukes, and it definitely helps that they've played together at Tucker. They were 2013 state title contender, and Tucker really teaches their athletes to play fast. They have got a top-notch program, and their head coach does not play around at all. So I know those two guys have been taught and coached very well, and will be really ready to go once they get to Georgia.
And we'll now bring a local tie into this interview, and he'll be a senior next season. But the hype surrounding Terry Godwin from Callaway High School in Hogansville just keeps growing, and for you lucky dogs, forgive the pun, he's already committed to Georgia. So have you had a chance to read up on Terry? Have you seen film of Terry? Are you excited about the commitment? Just what's your overall thoughts on Terry Godwin?
I actually spoke to Terry this week, and he's kind of caught in the craze right now a little bit too with all the SEC fans. SEC is a very interesting conference because everyone who would call themselves part of the SEC is very dedicated to the conference as a whole. But there's the competition within the conference is so intensive, and you really see that play out when it comes to the recruiting process of all of these players. And so, Terry has been committed to Georgia since January, but nothing's official until National Signing Day, and he has Alabama and Auburn both really, really fighting for him hard right now. And, he's getting some flack for that because he's come out and said, I'm committed to Georgia, but they're still some other dogs in the fight, if you want to say it that way. And he told me this week. I asked him, is there going to come a point where, obviously you're committed to Georgia, but is there going to come a point within this year coming up where you're, steadfast, this is where I'm going and no one's going to change my mind? And he said, honestly, it's going to be National Signing Day. He said, I'm not going to leave it be for now, but if any of these guys, if anybody ends up coming out on top over Georgia, it's not going to be known and fully decided until National Signing Day comes. And just switching back to Lorenzo Carter for 1 second, I mean, a lot of people didn't really know, but I spoke to him a couple of minutes after he made his announcement at Norcross this past spring or February, and he said, everyone knew I was going to Georgia. They thought I knew I was going to Georgia, but I didn't decide until this morning, the morning of National Signing Day, that I'm going to LSU. And I said, what? Okay, so what was it that switched, that, made your mind up? And he said, my sister just said something to me that really hit home, and that's, that it'd be so much bigger if I'm playing for my home state. And he said that really made my mind up. And when I told her that, his sister, and she was like, are you serious? I cannot believe that. But so I think for a lot of athletes, it really makes the difference to kind of go on and play for their home state. And like we've talked about the talent hotbed in Georgia recently, I think it's a big conflict for these players. They love going to play for their home states. That could be a huge part of the decision for Terry Godwin that we've got here. And he said, really, the recruiting process is just a lot of fun, because when you grow up, you don't really know what it's going to feel like to have the opportunity to be a part of that process. And he says, now I'm a part of it. And he said, I'm really just enjoying it. You're going to have people that are frustrated with you listening to Auburn, Alabama, or these other schools recruiting. But he said, in general, I'm really having a fun time with it. And he's also a baseball player. He goes to Callaway High School, and they just actually lost last night in the Elite Eight, so they won't move on. But that's another part of his decision for the college he's going to go to, is he'd like to play baseball at the next level as well. Georgia has, said that will be a definite. If he ends up going to Georgia, he'll play baseball there as well. He'll also play at Alabama or Auburn if he goes to either of those schools. And he has a lot of schools recruiting him. I think 14 all top-notch schools, 6 SEC schools, I think. The front runner right now is still Georgia.
And the one thing that I've learned about being in the media profession is that each year will bring new experiences. And you'll be at GPB for another year covering multiple sports as well as doing other projects around the company. So what are some new expectations that you have coming into the year, and is there anything you would like to do differently as you prepare to head into your next season covering sports for Georgia Public Broadcasting?
I'm so looking forward to this year, and it's really been so much fun to be a part of the whole high school football experience. I think it really all starts at the high school level, obviously, and it's just so, kind of pure. And, in television, there are all these stressful nights. There's always things going wrong. Anytime something's live, I mean, you do radio, so there's always stress. But sometimes that, that'll be the case. I'll walk over to the stands, and there's this group of 100 kids that are all, doing a whiteout or doing a blackout or neon or whatever, and they're just all screaming and excited, and it really just takes away that feeling. It's all of a sudden, wait a second, I'm at a high school football game. This is absolutely a blast. This is all for fun. There's no surgery going on here. Nobody's life is at stake. This is just a blast every time. And so I really love being involved in sports at the high school level at this point. And we have a big, we've pretty much set our schedule for this upcoming season. We've got most of our games slated. We have Norcross on there again. We have, I think, Mill Creek game. We have a lot of teams already slated, and we will still be doing our 30-minute all-access pass show this football season, and we're hoping to include a lot of football-related content in that show, especially when it gets to the playoffs, talking about brackets and all that. And I'm really interested in each week maybe doing going out and doing a feature story possibly on another game that's going on around the state. So while we each have our Friday night featured game of the week, I'd really like to maybe spotlight another big game that's going on that has a top prospect playing or something like that. So we have a lot going on for football, and also would like to start maybe covering some other sports. Right now we don't have the television space to cover more than football season, basketball championships, and cheerleading championships. But I think we've talked about social media, we've talked about the web, and how many opportunities there are to provide digital content to viewers and people that are interested. So, if anybody around the state, if you have any ideas about, sports or sporting events you'd like us to cover, athletes you're interested in maybe seeing a feature on or something run online, let us know, and I'd love to be a part of covering that for anybody interested. I'd like to expand our sports coverage, high school sports coverage digitally until, maybe one day there's more space on the airwaves for it. So that's kind of the plan for this upcoming season. We're so excited about it, and we're pretty much ready to roll.
Grace Olson from Georgia Public Broadcasting Sports joining us on Sports Overdrive this afternoon. Grace, I just want to say again, thank you for taking time out of your morning. I know you've had a lot going on this week and somehow made enough space to join us on the show today. But again, thank you for coming on the show today, and we just want to wish you the best of luck heading into the next season.
All right. Thank you so much, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
That was Grace Olson, sideline reporter and social media correspondent for Georgia Public Broadcasting Sports, joining us on Sports Overdrive. We talked about her career, what she's been able to accomplish so far. We also discussed Georgia football and recruiting, even threw in a little Terry Godwin talk there in the end, which is always special, especially in this part of the state, to bring a local tie into our interview. If you would like to stay connected with Grace Olson, especially during all of the state championship events that Georgia Public Broadcasting covers, you can give her a follow on Twitter for scores around the state of Georgia, as well as other content surrounding the event that they're at. Follow her on Twitter at Grace_E_Olson. Again, that's at Grace_E_Olson, OLSON. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is Sports Overdrive.